We're obviously joined today by Justin Wilkins, someone who we've been messaging quite a bit actually. So I've started my investment journey probably about a year and a half ago. And Justin is obviously invested in the Liverpool area. I'm based in Liverpool. So Justin, I'll hand over to you. Do you want to just briefly introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's been mentioned, I've invested in Liverpool. It's only just come around recently. I own a property down south because I'm actually based down on the south coast, just outside of Brighton. So just about as far away from Liverpool as you can get. And it takes me, it's about a 5 hour or 4.5 hour drive when I do go up. So I've got the one Buytolet up there as well. And obviously intending to grow that portfolio over the upcoming years, and through buying single lets and looking to kind of increase as much passive potential income as I can, and one day perhaps leave the job as well. But yeah, very passionate about property. It's something I've been part of for many years now. I think it will be all of my life.
What would you say are some of maybe the milestones that kind of got you to this point now, where you have your own property, you've already got one that you're tenanting out, and you're looking for that next deal? What have been the steps that have got you to this point?
Yeah, so quite a long journey. The main thing for me when I was growing up was my grandfather was a developer. So he was a property developer more so than investor, because back when he was around in the 80s and 90s, it was people flipped houses rather than, I don't think Buytolet was really much of a thing back then. So it was buying houses or buying commercial units, doing them up and selling them on. Unfortunately, he'd built quite a big portfolio and regularly bought at auctions, and I could kind of wasn't aware of it, but was, because I was that young. But unfortunately, he lost a large portion of that in the recession that was kind of in the early 90s, so just before I was born. But yeah, continued to be a huge part of my family's life. And so I guess a lot of my property comes from him, my parents who have always renovated houses. And then I grew up, I went to obviously school, college, wasn't quite sure what to do, but thought, well, look, I know I want to work in property. So I guess, what I'll do is I'll work in estate agency. So worked in a estate agency, did 7 years working for different companies throughout Brighton and mid Sussex. And I guess learnt the fundamentals of property, and when I was there, I would say that it didn't click straight away, but, certainly several years in, when you're seeing the same faces come back and buy property time and time again, it kind of started to click that something's going on here. They've got nice lifestyles, they're not working full-time jobs, they're turning up in relatively decent cars, and certainly the developers, I'd say, gave that impression. And I guess that's where my real interest for investing then was born, and started from there.
And you said your strategy is a bit like single units, single buy-to-lets and so on. Is that with a view? Is that for cash flow? Is that to just keep building portfolio? Like I said, maybe to retire earlier than you would want to. What's the end game, or for you at the minute? Because obviously it can evolve as years go on. But kind of where do you see this strategy taking you?
Yeah, so it's probably not the best strategy in terms of cash flow, but it's they're good, straightforward properties. I'm hoping obviously that they still cash flow reasonably. The one I just bought in Liverpool, rents are 525, it makes about 260 after all costs per month. So it is going to take a few of them to I guess replace an income. But so the goal for me was to be able to find an area where it had a low purchase price and therefore low deposit amount, so then I could buy more of them and then build up over time. So over the next, I guess, 3 to 5 years, I want to focus on building up, up to a potentially, hopefully getting around the £3,000 mark. I'd still be working at this point and still don't know whether I will stop working or still continue to. And we just want to be able to create a nice lifestyle for ourselves and be comfortable. And if I do want to step away from my full-time job, would like that option by the time I'm 35, say, which is actually 7 years away, but still.
Don't rub it in. I'm almost there now. Are there any other areas other than Liverpool that you think, because obviously Liverpool has loads of benefits for it, especially
Yeah.
there's loads of key areas where you can get really good value houses, like you say, lower purchase price, so easier to get into the market. Are there any other areas that kind of pique your interest? Because like I say, it's a long way away, so I'm assuming you've looked across the whole country before you went to Liverpool, maybe.
Yeah, so definitely. So obviously I would have bought, if, you know, in an ideal world, would have bought down south if I could have done, because, you know, where I live, for example, you know, a basic one bed flat at very cheapest, you're looking at about 200,000. And when it only rents for £800, you know, yes, it's still a viable project, but it's not a good return at all. So, that's why I started looking in other areas. And really for me, it was, as I say, kind of comparing rental demand, the prices that achieved, and obviously the actual initial investment cost. So a low investment cost, that kind of, they were my goals. And then I went around and researched different areas. So, you know, looked at Leeds, looked at Manchester, looked at South Wales, and looked at Liverpool. And for me, Liverpool, the reason I chose it is because it offers, I guess, a combination of all of those things, plus the actual city itself has got some great fundamentals. You know, the council are really pumping some money into it, some great football clubs. I just think as an area, it could potentially be somewhere for capital growth in the future. So that was why I focused on Liverpool. And going forward, if I get to the point where maybe I've got 4 or 5 in Liverpool, I'm kind of the opinion now that I would like to diversify a bit and not hold all of my eggs in one basket. So then potentially looking at other areas, such as down south, there is an area that's come perhaps around a bit more recently as a potential growth area. It's not so great because it doesn't have like a main city centre, but it's an area called Hastings, which is down on the south coast, where it's relatively cheap, and it could be somewhere for me to, as I say, diversify and make sure that I'm spreading my properties around a bit. You know, having a few in 2 different areas, I personally believe might be a better strategy in case one of those areas took a dip, or I don't know, for some reason had a hit and bad rap or something, you know. So that's thinking really long term though.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think the same. I think we saw another property and it was like a couple streets away from the first. And even though you're like, oh yeah, it probably is a good deal, in the back of my mind, I'm like, is that diverse enough? Maybe it's too early when you've only got a couple, but yeah, that idea of not only maybe different cities, but maybe even different projects. So maybe some are HMOs and some are single lets. But yeah, like you say, years down the line, probably for us at the minute.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your background like an estate agency. What kind of things did you bring from your employment into the investment kind of world? What tips were there, or what things, because you'd seen, you know, the mechanics and the workings behind the machine that you could then use to your advantage?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, one thing as an estate agent, you know, I particularly realize it now, having, you know, looking back, because I don't work within that industry now, but looking back, you know, you would see people, you know, they go to courses and they're told on these educational courses, go into, you know, an estate agent, take them 12 donuts and tell them you're a new investor, and then you'll build a relationship, you know. And, you know, yes, it's better than doing nothing, but it's just really, it's a bit cringe, and it's very obvious what you're doing. And as an estate agent on the other side of that, you know, it takes quite a while to build up that relationship, not just 1 or 2 check-ins by someone. You know, when we had a property come on that was a real deal and we knew it had potential, we would want to send it in the direction of a developer or an investor, because then we thought we might get it back, whether that being selling it again or renting it. So we'd want to work with those individuals, but you'd automatically always have 4 or 5 people in your head that you'd worked with before, you know, they'd bought, and, you know, knew they'd give it back. So they would always be your top 5. So I'd say, from an outsider point of view, if you are a new investor and you want to work with estate agents, you know, do build really good relationships with them, because you want to be on that top 5 that they think of the minute a property comes on. And then, you know, the other thing being just the tools as well, which everyone's, I think, better at using now, all the different websites for comparables. The one that isn't published, or sorry, I guess promoted much, because it is just for estate agents really, is RightMove Plus. You know, if you know someone in the industry and you can get hold of a login, the RightMove Plus is like a back-end login for RightMove, and it just gives that next level of detail. You know,
what are some of the things you could get from that then, maybe?
What's that, sorry?
What are some of the extras you could get if you had access to the RightMove Plus?
Yeah, so it's like the dates they were listed, the original prices, what they were dropped to, you know, the estate agent, you know, and it goes back for years, you know, for a good 10 years, I think, a lot, if not more, I think a lot of the, you know, the archives. So obviously the addresses, and it's just that next level form of detail, and it's all in one place. So as an estate agent, it's great because you're, you know, you've been booked to go on a valuation to someone's house, and you want as much detail and evidence behind you as possible, so you can create that one report from that one place. I think Zoopla do something similar now to RightMove, because they're all having to keep up with RightMove and hopefully overtake them with what's been going on lately. You know.
Yeah, I remember watching one of your videos, and you were, I think it was when you were, you know, offering some of your time up in those booking slots. And you were talking about using like the lingua franca, like ringing up somebody and going, "I have those contracts been sent in," or, you know, and using the verbiage that professionals use just so that they know, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. I thought that was an interesting way of, it's probably relatively easy for you to find that list of things, especially if you've done it before, finding that list of documents, but just having that in front of you and speaking like that might engage them a bit more, make them work a bit better for you. But I thought that was a really interesting point you made on that one.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's, the thing is, when you don't appreciate it at the time that you're an estate agent, but now taking a step back, you know, when I was buying my first investment in Liverpool, I knew exactly what to call up to the solicitor and say, you know, rather than just say, "Can I have an update?"
Yeah.
I knew to call her and say, "Has the draft contracts gone out? You know, have the fixtures and fittings form come in?" And also I got a good response from my solicitor, because she knew I was completely on it and not just being a wind up by calling and saying, "What's the update?" You know, so people do, you know, people respond better when they know that you're on your level, I think, and that you can have a proper conversation about something.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. So if we move now onto like the Liverpool property, I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk to people like yourself, like those early on in their, like on their journey, is to try and find like the mistakes and the things. So for me personally, the first house my wife and I got through the company was one that was just, it was straightforward, needed no work doing to it, because in our heads we were thinking of time as a bit of a resource, really.
Yeah.
So the house was probably worth exactly what it was bought for. There's very little money recycling, but at the time we were like, yeah, that's brilliant, because we can just rent it out straight away. But in hindsight, I think I would have rather have pulled some of that money back out. So that's like a mistake I feel like we've made, but not really a mistake, just like a learning curve that we've taken from this one. What would you say from your Liverpool property? Was there anything when you look back, you go, yeah, you know what, with property number 2, I'm going to not do that or do this different? What would you say for that?
Yeah, I mean, mine's somewhat similar to that. I think, you know, my intention was always to try and refinance quickly at first. And then, you know, I was going out, obviously, up there at weekends, and I was doing viewings, you know, Friday, Saturdays. And I just happened with, you know, I was going, the first few times I, you know, went up and found properties, I placed offers, and it didn't work out. And then this particular weekend that I went up, the first viewing of the day was this house, and it was actually in a week, you know, out of maybe 20 or 30 viewings, this was the only house which could have been almost habitable within a few weeks. So it was completely not what I was expecting to look at. But I just happened to walk in, I met the owner. She told me that she was in a position in which she, you know, she'd had a sale fall through. She wanted to get going and would, you know, compromise because of that. And then I carried on with my day, and I viewed multiple other properties after that. And, you know, these houses were complete holes. The rest of them, you know, they full refurbishment, you know, a couple of, you know, one of them was actually, you know, had a fire inside, you know, so it's completely blacked out and needed, you know, everything redoing. And I just thought, well, these houses are on for the similar price, you know, so if I could go back to the first lady or the first viewing and offer her a low amount, and we can agree to a price that works for my figures, there's nothing wrong with going with a house that's already done, you know, just because it's not what people online are doing. Also, being that it was my first deal, I thought actually that could work well. So it was, yeah, probably similar to you. I bought it, and it was, you know, it didn't need much work. We went up there, we replastered, repainted, you know, did some just general maintenance jobs, and it took us sort of 3 or 4 days, and it was ready to go. However, with that being said, it meant, you know, did mean that for me, the decision changed to actually, I'm not going to refinance immediately. I'm probably going to refinance in 2022, say. And therefore, yeah, starting again, maybe it would have been better to really go for something where you could buy it really cheap, add value, refinance, and then go again. But, you know, it's not a mistake. It's just, it's a learning curve. I'm still happy with that deal, as you probably are with yours. And, you know, you just move on to the next one, don't you? And you take those lessons learned. So
yeah, and I mean, you haven't had to spend hours and hours of heartache chasing people up. Like,
no,
you've got a really good house, so you've saved all that hassle that would have come with the fire damage place if you wanted to buy it. So yeah, it's not the worst decision in the world. It's just, it's the first one you made, I guess.
that's it. Yeah.
What would you say for then, in terms of like any of those that we were talking before we kind of recorded, any of those new investors who are, you know, they're almost where we are now in terms of ready to get that first property? Would you give them any kind of tips or anything? I know there's infinite amount, but what ones maybe stick in your mind?
Just, you know, don't feel, I think a lot of people that message me on Instagram really feel pressured to be doing a course because they have time off, because they're so new and they're hungry to learn, which I really, you know, it's great. You know, they feel pressured to do a course. You know, there's a lot of people out there saying, if you do a course, it's worth the value. You know, you'll spend $2,000 or spend 10 grand, or all the varying different prices. You will get that back in the deals that you do. And I appreciate that when it comes to, you know, education, I'm not completely saying it's a waste of money. I'm just saying, you know, because I do think that certain elements of it hold you accountable, but I'm just saying at the moment we have the benefit of time. We have the benefit of the fact that we are potentially, if people are being furloughed and they're still being paid and yet they're not working, they have this time to learn. So you don't need to then spend £2,000 to then quickly learn it. You can learn it whilst you're off. So just really take the time, do the basics. And, you know, for me, it was a couple of years ago. Yeah, nearly maybe a year and a half ago, I picked up Property Magic, which is Simon Zucci's book. Completely game changer for me. You know, take the time, read. There's so many podcasts out there. If you want suggestions, drop me a message. And watch YouTube as well. You can learn so much stuff with YouTube. Anything that I've wanted to know, I would just put in the YouTube search bar or the Google search bar and go from there. So that would be my first tip. I mean, it's an obvious one. I do think, you know, there's also an opportunity when we come out of lockdown and we are allowed to talk to each other again face to face, that if you've got a little bit of money aside, find someone that's not necessarily like if you picked a mentor, you might pick someone who's 5 or 10 years ahead of you. But if you were just going to, as an example, pick someone who's a year ahead of you, or maybe just has their first property, has 2 properties, and they're that next step ahead of you or 2 steps ahead of you, message them, you know, invite them for a coffee, invite them for dinner, you know, and then spend an hour soaking up their time. And, you know, obviously try and give them some value, or you're taking them for dinner. So at the end of the day, you are doing something in return. But that money for me is far greater spent, you know, 50 quid on a dinner versus £2,000 on a course. You know, the experiences you'll learn firsthand.
Yeah, definitely. And just how much you could get from it. So if you were like, okay, I'm happy to spend £2,000 on a course, but if I can divide that into £50 or how many coffees I could buy for that, then you could really reach out and get more experience, maybe with a more diverse set of investors, maybe I would have thought. I'm going to ask you a question that came through on Instagram. So it was from Lex Property, and they responded to a story. They said, if you had 300K, be really nice, wouldn't it? If you had 300K, what would you do with it? So that's from Lex on Insta.
Cool. So yeah, it would be lovely to have 300K. And I don't think I would do much different because I'm so set on the strategy and not, you know, varying away from it too much. You know, I don't particularly want to. A lot of people perhaps use that to go down the HMO route or, you know, commercial conversion route. I personally, you know, I know what my goals look like for the next 5 years. I've reverse engineered the amount of money I want and how I'm going to have to do that over those years. So it would be lovely just because I would know I'd go the exact same strategy and just buy at a much quicker rate. So it'd be spending, you know, going up there every week, spending days viewing and just making lots more offers and agreeing a lot more deals. So it'd be the same kind of deals. It'd be in that magic sweet spot of, you know, 50 to 80K houses that are 2 bed that hopefully, you know, cash flow 250 to 300 a month after expenses. And yeah, nothing exciting, I'm afraid, to answer to that.
Yeah, I think sensible is okay. I think it's, yeah, like I say, you've got your plan, and if you can just get through it faster, if you had the capital there, I think that makes sense. My last kind of set of questions, when I was first starting out, it was always like, I'm really big on, so I'm a teacher, and I love the idea of outsourcing. So if we were doing, like, we do awards evenings for our GCSE pupils.
Yeah.
And instead of me putting the PowerPoint together that we share with parents in our big hall, I go to Fiverr, I get a really nice animation made with the school logo. It looks like £1,000,000. It's fantastic. And someone else has done it because I know they're better than I am.
Yeah.
Now, with you, it sounds like you didn't use like a sourcing company. You came up and you did the homework yourself, you did the journey, and you did the viewing. I know though that you do use a management company, obviously, because you can't be as close. Kind of, what are your views? Not necessarily like pros and cons of each, but maybe why did you decide to come and do everything yourself, and maybe not use a sourcer? And then what are some of the advantages you found of using the management company now to take care of it day in and day out?
Yeah, so for me, it depends how your investing strategy. For me, part of investing is pure enjoyment of loving houses as well. So for me a lot of people, the thought of coming up to Liverpool several weekends in a row or over a few months or whatever their investment area is, if it's several hours away, the thought of doing that isn't necessarily that appealing. But for me, it was, and it was a road trip, and I'd enjoy it, the feeling of viewing houses back to back, and they were all potential ones I could offer on. It was very exciting. And so that was part of the reason. And then the other reason being that, I am signed up with a few sources in the areas, and I'm not the first person to say it, and it's not with anything against sources, but a lot of them are sending through deals that are available to everyone. I don't class you necessarily as a deal sourcer if you found a deal on RightMove, haven't agreed a lower purchase price on it, and you're just sending me a few pictures of it. So, and I don't mean that to offend anyone. I think just the value from being a sourcer, if you are one, comes from finding direct to vendor leads and agreeing lower prices. Or you could do RightMove leads, but you need to have gone there, viewed it, and essentially got some value by agreeing a much lower price and bringing that to me. So then I have something to work off of. So there's two reasons, but they're the main things. But I'm completely with you. Usually I would like to outsource. I'm only just starting to do that really in terms of, with some of my marketing stuff and social media, and obviously as a recommendation for a logo, I used Fiverr recently and was been really impressed with it actually. Very quick and very high quality for a low cost as well. So yeah, I would recommend anyone trying it, and for anything you can take off your workload for a small cost, you can then work on the next thing. It's just a way of speeding things up, isn't it?
Well, maybe some of the advantages of the management company that you use, kind of how's that been for you with the Liverpool property?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. So again, when I first signed up to them, they were helping me find a tenant. I wasn't necessarily too pleased with some of their service, and in terms of getting them going, they're a bit slow. And I wasn't, didn't keep that quiet. I have obviously made my frustrations aware, but actually once they found a tenant, they actually got me more than it was on the rental market for, which I was very pleased with, of course. And then since then, there was a time in which the tenants had gone on holiday, for example, and this was only the second month in, I think, and they'd gone on holiday, and just by chance, where they've got quite a nice big range cooker and behind it's a splashback, it fallen off and completely smashed. And it's just one of those things. But they sorted it all for me. They told me they got a quote and told me the price. I then went online and actually checked if I thought that was a reasonable quote, and I really did. Actually, it was very reasonable. They had it sorted within 2 to 3 days, and it wasn't much more than just an email to me. I didn't have to look up what I thought the price of it would be. I just decided to check that I was getting value for money. So in that respect, being down here in Brighton, near Brighton, I haven't had to get hands-on at all. I just had to reply to an email. Also very grateful for the fact that I haven't had to I guess it sounds like, I don't mean this horribly, but had too much communication with tenants during this coronavirus period. It's been taken care of for me. I've had 2 months worth of rent come in during this time, which is considered very difficult. So again, yeah, I feel very fortunate, and I do think they're looking after me well in that respect.
Yeah, and you're right. You kind of want them to, you don't want them just to come to you with all the questions. Otherwise, that's pointless, them even being the management company. If they can get solutions to you and go, by the way, this is the best one, just so you know, that's hopefully best for you and for them, I would have thought. So what I'd say is, how can people find out more about you? Where could they go if they wanted to contact you, or, just kind of follow your journey on investment?
Yeah, I try and put myself out there as much as possible every day. So obviously Instagram's probably where I'm most active. YouTube now, as most recent, I've been uploading videos to YouTube to try and help new investors, because of course I still consider myself very new with only 2 houses, which one of them is a buy-to-let. I'm still really new, so don't think that I'm sitting here and telling the world how to do this, but I want to give advice to those that are one step behind, and also have a website as well. So that's justinwilkins.co.uk.
Hey, I've been working like 3 jobs, probably why I never see ya, probably why I never have time for the fake friends I won't be ya. Oh God, I've been running now.